Hey, this is Russell Moore. This is Reading in Exile. We go around and pull books off the shelf here and talk about them. But today I want to answer a reader question. And Adam had written in not about a particular book, but more about the process of reading itself. And he says this. He says, "Thank you for doing the Reading in Exile series. I have three questions that others may have already asked. Number one, how do you determine what you are going to read? Do you look at the New York Times bestseller list or use recommendations from colleagues, friends, and family? Number two, what's your opinion on audiobooks or ebooks? From the looks of your bookshelves, you look like you like to have a physical book in your hand. And number three, how do you determine what books you're going to buy and keep? Do you ever check books out at a library?" Those are the questions. And the answer to that is, how do I decide what to read? I read what I want to. And I say that not being sarcastic. I'm saying that what I have found is that if somebody says you need to read this, it's usually not going to be as helpful as if you start to cultivate what are the kinds of books that speak to you, and then sort of explore as early as you possibly can in your life the full range of the sorts of books that you have an interest in that you're going to continue to read, and then sort of to build out from there. So there are all sorts of books that I may start to read. And if I find this is not something that I find helpful, or I'm finding it a chore to read this, then I'll put it away and move on with something else. In terms of deciding what to buy, I don't look at the New York Times bestseller list ever. What I do look at, though, is the New York Times book review, which will often tell you what sorts of books are coming out, or right around the time, or the Wall Street Journal review section on Saturdays, or the New York Review of Books, the Literary Review, Times Literary Supplement, all of those things, as well as there are some, often you can find, for instance, the New York Review of Books, the best thing, the most useful thing to me in that every time are the advertisements, especially from smaller presses, independent presses, university presses, things that you might not otherwise know about, that I'll sometimes just put on my Amazon wish list even if they're not coming out for another year or so. And then when they do, I can get them from wherever I buy books. That's one way. Another way is, as you mentioned, recommendations from friends and colleagues. A lot of times people with similar interests will say, "Hey, here's a book that you really need to read." And then also just serendipity. One of the things that's so great about physical bookstores is walking around and finding books that you had not seen before and getting those things. Now, you've got a sort of an equivalent to some degree of it with algorithms on Amazon or elsewhere that will say, if you like this, then you'll like that. But there's nothing like the serendipity of a physical bookstore. In terms of audiobooks, I listen to a lot of audiobooks. And I read ebooks as well as physical books, but they're totally different. So I need physical books because there's an entirely different, and there are all sorts of studies that show this, an entirely different cognitive and immersive experience with a physical book than with a page on a screen. And you have the ability to mark and to go back and to retrace your steps in a physical book in a way that I don't with with an ebook. So there will be all sorts of things that are kind of ephemeral that I will read on an ebook that I would not ever think that I was going to reference again. So there might be something on some contemporary issue that's going on right now, or something like that, that I might read on an ebook. Sometimes I find, wait a minute, I really want to interact more with this, and I'll get the physical book also. But usually, you know that. And then things with audiobooks, I listen to audiobooks, but there are only certain kinds of audiobooks that I can listen to, and this may not be the case for you at all. But for me, it's got to be something, because I listen to them mostly when I'm driving or when I'm walking. And what I want is something that I can tune out on, because my attention will start thinking about something else, and I can come back in and not be lost. So I'm not going to listen to an audiobook of Leo Tolstoy or Dostoevsky or any, really almost any novel. I'm not going to listen to an audiobook, because I'll be distracted, and then when I come back in, I'll say, Anna, who's Anna? I mean, I don't know where I am. But if you're listening to I was listening not long ago, a biography of Harry Truman. I can wander off. I come back in. You can start back up when it's a biography. So that's helpful for me. I would check out a lot of things out of libraries when I was in academic life, and I had a library right there next to me. I don't do as much, just because the library near my house usually is more kind of things that are on the bestseller list right now, and not really the stuff that I mostly read. But that's just me. I think libraries are great, and I think that you should take advantage of them if you have them. So that's the question that Adam had. If you have a question about any particular book or any aspect of books, let me know in the comments, and we'll see you next time here on Reading in Exile. This is Russell Moore.